So it's great that y'all are here. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to work with your kids. You've got some awesome kids, and this is an amazing school. And the fact that you're taking out time to come help yourself, help your kids on a Friday morning, my gosh, that puts you at the top of the class right there. So thank you, and just appreciate y'all being here today. Okay, now the title was write some simple strategies, right? Okay, simple strategies. So I wanted to have a little disclaimer about that word simple, right? This is a quote I wanted to pull up here. It's easy once you understand it. And yes, that was Dr. Dowell Flatt. My first Greek teacher. I had a whole string of Greek teachers through college. But I think that was his little dry sense of humor there, because like in the Greek language, there are literally 17 ways to say the word the. And I'm telling you, the letters look strange, they sound strange. So he said it's simple once you understand it. And that's pretty much true with everything, right? Here's another quote for you. Yeah, put it in a French drain. It's simple, right? That's Johnny the construction dude from Home Depot. I don't know if you've met him or not. He's a great guy. And he's right, it is simple. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'll tell you something, it isn't. It's not easy in the sense of no work. Simple does not mean no work. And that's reverse blank there, I think. I don't know. So simple doesn't mean no work. It's not equal to that. Good news, you can do it. None of this stuff is really tough. It can be done. You guys can do it. And that's the cool thing about this. If you want to help your kids, you're in a good spot because you are their parents. They need you more than anybody else in the world. God's given them to you for a reason. And you got to believe that. When you're at your wit's end, you just got to pray and trust God. Because it's not an accident that you have those kids. He gave them to you for a reason, so you can do this thing. Now, we're going to do a quick review, and just very briefly, because, we went over a lot of this stuff the last time. So, what is anxiety? Those are two big questions. What is anxiety, and what is the treatment? Number one, anxiety is an excessive fear. If you want to add about something, that's cool too. But anxiety is an excessive fear. And what we have to say about it is fear is a pretty normal thing. And you've got to have some fear to be able to survive in this world. So the key word you want to look at there is the word excessive. Is a fear excessive? And then it becomes anxiety, because we've got to have fear to keep us alive. So anxiety is an excessive fear that keeps us from fully living. Fear is a normal part of life that keeps us alive. So I hope you can see the difference. One keeps us alive, the other one keeps us from fully living. And so that's why we want to address that, because it breaks our hearts when we see it in our kids. I mean, it's bad enough in our own lives when we're staying up thinking about something. We don't want to see that in our kiddos, and that's why you're here this morning. So what's the treatment for anxiety? And we're going to go very simple today. And I'm going to go pretty quickly. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of time at the end for comments, questions. Didn't get to do that last time. In fact, most of the stuff we're going to be covering today is stuff that I had at the last part of my talk for the first session on anxiety. But we totally ran out of time. And that's cool, so I'm glad y'all are here for part two. So the treatment for anxiety is simply change your thinking. Change your thinking. I mean, it's simple, but it's not simple. It's challenging, but I want to tell you, you can do it. You can do it. You really can. So in part of the review, there are three parts if you want to talk about the human being. Not from a spiritual perspective, but in terms of their well-being, their emotional well-being. You got the thoughts, you got the emotions, you got the behavior. And if you affect one of those things, you're going to affect all three. You can't change one without changing all three of them. And there are many parts. I mean, we got our spirit, we got our body. Really, you affect any one part of us, it's going to change the whole system. And that's true in a family, by the way. Something goes on with mama, it's going to affect the whole family. If baby's having a problem, everybody in the whole family is going to be affected by that. In any system, you change one part, it will change the whole system. Well, it's the same thing here. So the part we're going to be looking at today is the thought part. And that we pause, think about some things that are most important. What did Jesus say? What is a profit of man if he gains the whole world, loses his soul? So you got your kids in a good spot here. Anyway, thank you all for being here. So we were talking about how when we can look at different parts of us, and if we change one part of us, it's going to change all the rest of us. And let me just throw this out here. This wasn't really in my notes, but it's not uncommon when I'm seeing somebody in private practice that I'll say, go to the doctor, please. Go to the doctor, just get a checkup. If you or your child are having a sudden or drastic mood shift, just get a medical checkup. I mean, wouldn't that be nice if you could just take care of something, if there's something going on in your body that you weren't aware of, and have that taken care of? So we got to look at all parts here. And our physical bodies are part of it as well. If your kids are up surfing web at night, you're going to feel pretty crummy the next day. And yes, they're going to be worried about stuff and struggle with anxiety. So I'm telling you, it all goes together there. It's all tied together. The three I have down here, thought, emotion, behavior. We could make this list, 15 words long, but I put those three down. Because really, if we affect one, we're going to affect them all. Now, I threw something out in the class this week. It was sort of funny. I said, I'm going to say something, and you guys tell me if you believe me or not. I said, nothing really bothers us. They're like, what? What are you saying? I mean, they couldn't understand. I mean, that's sort of a strange thing. I think it was the fourth grade class. This one young man raised his hand. He said, Mr. Vick, I'm pretty sure these girls in this class will really bug me. So he was pretty convinced of that. And so I had to tell him the other part of it. Nothing really bothers us. It's what we believe about that thing. Nothing really bothers us. It's what we believe. And that's the basis of cognitive therapy. If you look at the book list at the end, I have two authors. I mentioned one's Aaron Beck, another one's Albert Ellis. I have a couple books up here by them, but they're like the father and grandfather of cognitive therapy. And basically, if you change the way you are thinking, it's going to change everything about you. And that's not a new concept, by the way. Way back 3,000 years ago, the Bible said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Paul said about 2,000 years ago, he said in Romans chapter 12, he said, be transformed. How? By the renewing of your mind. So this is not a new concept. I mean, psychologists just figured this out recently, that sitting around and talking about your problems doesn't help you a whole lot. Sometimes it makes things worse. You can do that for years and years. But if you actually do the work of changing how you think, it can revolutionize your life. So as Christians, we can embrace that idea. That's a biblical idea. One quote that I want to throw up here is, man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. And that was about 100 AD. But it's the same thing. Nothing bothers you. It's what you believe about those things. So the cure for anxiety and depression, I'll toss that in here. We're not really talking about depression today, but the same cure for both of them is going to be to change our thinking. Now here's the problem. What psychologists call cognitive distortion or unhelpful thinking. Those are good descriptions. I think a simpler term would just be a lie. It's too easy to believe a lie or a half-truth. Sometimes our brains get stuck in this route, right, where we're believing something about a situation that just simply isn't true. Let me give you a very simple one, and this happens at school a lot. Kids walking down the hall, they say hi to their friend, and their friend ignores them. Okay, what do they believe about that? What's their first thought? What did I do? Maybe I said something last week. Maybe they saw that post on Facebook yesterday. I mean, their minds could go a million places. What's probably the truth?
They didn't hear him.
They didn't even hear him. They didn't know what was going on. They were thinking about something else and they missed it. And so they end up believing something that's not true. Now, the other part of it is, maybe it is true. Maybe their friend is upset. But all of a sudden, it's the end of the world. My friend didn't say hi to me anymore. Well, that's also a cognitive distortion, isn't it? It's also a lie. And we can't say that to them, but it's just not true. If their friend ignores them, it's not the end of the world. If you have a friend that doesn't return your email in 15 minutes, that's not the end of the world. But sometimes we got an enemy to our soul. We pray the St. Michael's prayer every day here. We have an enemy to our soul who wants to give us these ideas that certain things are true when they're not true. And that's what's going to mess us up. And some of the things we see are filtering. And I don't have this in the notes, but I just wanted to mention a couple of these types of lies before we jump into some of the strategies. We're doing fine on time here. So filtering is focusing only on the negative and ignoring all the positive. So we see that a lot. You could do 100 things right. I sometimes work with people who have various addictions. And they could have 2 years of going straight, and they stumble one time. And what do they look at? Oh, I don't know how I could do this. And, I understand the remorse and the regret, because when you put something behind you, you want to leave it. But then when that brings on shame, do you think that shame and guilt is going to help them to do better? See, the Bible teaches us that there are 2 kinds of sorrow. One's a good kind of sorrow. Think about this. This is huge now. There's 2 kinds of sorrow. One is a godly sorrow that leads to change. The Bible calls it repentance. But a godly sorrow leads to change, and that's what I want us to think about here a little bit today. Whereas a worldly sorrow leads to death. To death. That's right. If you're heaping this guilt on yourself, or if you're putting it on somebody else, if you have shame and despair, that will take you straight down to the pit. It will make every day a living hell. But if you embrace a godly sorrow, that didn't go so well. Let's see here. What can I learn from this? I'm never going to do that again, that's for sure. That's a godly sorrow. The other kind of sorrow that says, I must be a horrible person. I don't even know why God loves me. I don't know why anybody loves me. I don't know if I can do this. That's a worldly sorrow. That will lead you to death. So there's a filter that sometimes we have, and that's one of the problems here. It's called a cognitive distortion, but it's also simply a lie. Another lie is mind reading. Oh, that person must be thinking that I did something wrong. We've tried to get into that person's head, and how many times have we just simply gotten it wrong ourselves because we can't read minds? We don't know the situation. We can guess. We can try to figure it out, but we can't read minds. Jumping to conclusions. All these sort of go together. We have something happen to us one time, and we think, therefore, it must be that way. Catastrophizing. That is a word, by the way, but you won't find it in the dictionary. It's something counselors talk about. Catastrophizing. Everything's a catastrophe. Oh, no, it's the end of the world. I didn't get invited to this party. Kids got their own, and adults have their own. It's something we can all fall into. But are we making too big a deal out of this? That's going to affect anxiety. I'm sad, it must be bad. That's emotional reasoning. Ignoring the good, that sort of goes along with the filtering we mentioned. A million good things may happen in our lives. We may get straight A's, and then we get an A-. It's like, oh no. Well, what can we learn from this situation? That stinks. That wasn't what I was going for. But what can I learn from this moving forward? Maybe I even got a B. That really stinks because I wanted an A. I don't like that. I don't have to like it. I don't have to say it's okay. But I can also realize that there's some good here. I have done good in some other things. I have the ability to do some good in this one as well. And I can learn something from this. This doesn't have to be just a horrible event. This can be something good for me. Setting the bar too high, and that goes along with the same thing. You know, we could do this. We could have a whole 45-minute session talking about these cognitive distortions. The last one, I wanted to mention it. It's a big one, especially in cognitive therapy. It is the shoulds. The shoulds. Albert Ellis was famous for saying, "Don't should on yourself." Don't say it too fast, by the way. But too many times we say, well, that driver shouldn't be like that. Why did he drive that? Why did he cut in front of me? He shouldn't do that. Or, I really should have done better. Or, my kids should behave. I mean, just think about how many times you use that word should. Now, we have a way that we would like for the world to run, but things don't always work that way, do they? So, in the words of Albert Ellis, don't should on yourself, and don't allow your kids to do it either. Be cognizant of the fact that there are some things we'd like to be a certain way. Recognize that, but then accept it if it doesn't happen. We don't have to accept that as being good, but we can accept it as the way it is, and accept the fact that our life can move forward in a good way, even if something's not the way it should be. All right, so back to the simple part here. What are some simple strategies to help our kids? First one, take care of yourself. And he said, Dave, listen, what you've seen on the movies, it doesn't really happen. We don't just run into burning buildings. We do save people all the time. But he said, think about it. If I go into a burning building to save somebody and I get injured, I not only cannot help that person, I've also tied up somebody else, maybe two other people, who now have to help me, and then they can't help the people in the fire. Have you thought about that? If a fireman gets injured, one or two other firemen are not going to be able to help people. Now, they'll have to help the first one. He says we have to make sure we can do this in a safe way. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. And that sounds so horribly selfish, doesn't it? And it could be. You know, if it was said in a selfish way. I'm taking care of myself first. No, that's not the way it's said. It said, I can't help somebody else unless I am in a good position to do that myself. That is so important as parents, as adults in our home, that we set a good role model for our kids. Doing the things every day that we need to do, that we're healthy ourselves. If we're struggling with anxiety, we're dealing with that. If we're struggling with anger or whatever, we're showing them that we are working on it. We're up front with them. We're showing them that we are learners too. We're trying to grow and improve in our lives. So take care of yourself. That's numero uno. Second one, ask good questions. Ask good questions. So the temptation is to ask these types of questions. Did you have a good day? Yeah. Everything go all right? Yeah. And our kids don't tell us a whole lot. That's called a closed-ended question. How many of y'all are familiar with the term open-ended, closed-ended questions? Okay. So that's good. So the challenging part is to practice using open-ended questions. Rather than saying, did you have a good day? Say, tell me about your friends. What happened today? And then continue to ask questions with a curiosity. The challenge is to have a curiosity without being nosy. We want curiosity without being nosy. And we don't want to be judgmental either. So if you just are curious about it, you know, and if they don't want to talk about it, you can pull back from that if it's about like a major emergency or something. So another thing is consider the types of questions you ask. Have you ever thought about the types of questions you ask? Do you ask positive or negative questions? In solution-focused therapy, I really like that for some aspects, but if you're ever doing your reading or watching the YouTubes about solution-focused therapy, one of the big things is in the types of questions. that you ask people. It's very helpful to ask people questions and think about the answers you'll get. It's always funny to watch people who are not used to being in front of kids stand up and try to address a group of kids. Like, they don't know how to control. They'll ask questions, then they're surprised when they ask a rhetorical question that the kids all shout out and answer. And but in life, when we ask questions, people typically respond with whatever we're asking. And so if we ask a positive question, many times they'll give us a positive answer. It's always shocking to my clients when I ask them, well, what's going well? Because typically when you go into a counseling office, you're ready to spill your guts about all the bad stuff, right? And that's important too. There's a time for that. But in order to get better, what else do you have to think about? What's going well? In every bad situation, there's going to be some good things going on, right? So I've made it a habit when I go into the classes, usually every time when I go into a class and I'm talking to the kiddos, I'll start off with that question. What's gone well this week? Well, yesterday in the 5th grade, I forgot to ask that question. So the students just let me know, Mr. Vick, you forgot to ask us what went well. And they love talking about that. Now, if I said, how is your week? What would they answer? Okay, it went crummy. I stubbed my toe yesterday. You know, the list could go on. I got sick. I mean, whatever. If you ask somebody, you know, what's happened, they will typically give you a negative answer. I hate to tell you that, but unfortunately it's true. But if you say, on the other hand, what's gone well? So think about the types of questions you're asking your kids, because the type of question can really produce a different response. Now, it's not that you don't want to talk about that, but you want to train your kids to focus on the good things that are happening in their life. We all have so many blessings that we never see, don't we? But if we don't think about it, we'll focus on the half-empty glass rather than the half-full glass. So, positive question. Then, okay, I'm going to give you a little secret here. There is $1 million question. I don't know if I should whisper this or not. I don't know if you should turn off the recording. No, that's all right. You can leave it on. But there is $1 million question. Are you all ready? You're going to want to write this down. This is very complicated. And therapists have worked on this for decades to craft this question in order to get a good response from children, from adults. Are you ready for it? What else? Go ahead and write it down. What else? That's it. I know it sounds simple. Now, I say it's $1 million question because it's not just a counseling question. That is a marketing question. How much money has 7-Eleven and QT made by those 2 words? What else? Oh, that's right, I forgot. Let me run. I need to get this. Or you're driving through McDonald's and they say, yeah, I want a hamburger, I want French fries, a Coke, and they say, what else? Okay, give me a milkshake, or whatever it is, you know. What else? 2 words have made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And there's a joke in solution-focused therapy. If you don't know what to say, just say, what else? And people will tell you. And so I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you that little secret or not, but it's awesome because usually there's always something else. People rarely tell you. I don't know. Be long before I was ever a counselor, I realized I had to ask somebody like 3 or 4 times how they're doing before they would ever tell me how they're doing, right? Well, the same thing. Typically, there's more to the story. If you ask somebody, what else? You had a great day, that went well. What else? Oh, so there was a struggle with a certain teacher, with one of your friends. Well, what else? You know, if you say that in a caring way, in a curious way, in a kind way, your kids are going to talk to you some. And part of the reason why this talking to your kids is going to help them with anxiety is because we, as human beings, process things through talking. How can I see if something is a lie or if it's the truth? If I just keep it in my head, I might be able to. But when you throw something down on the table and you examine it from different perspectives, you tell it to another person, all of a sudden you start saying to yourself, you know, I was really upset with that, but that sounds sort of silly now that I'm telling you. How many of y'all have experienced that? So it's very important for this kind of questioning with your kiddos so they can process through things, see what is true in a situation, what they should be concerned about and what they shouldn't be. So ask good questions. How are we doing here? We're doing good. We're doing well. Let me improve my grammar there. Number 3. Remember the 100 years from now principle. So, I mean, you could call it different things. You could call it remember the deathbed principle. That sounds sort of morbid, though. I'll just say 100 years from now. For us, that's when we're on our deathbed. You would use that with your kids. Let me just tell you that. What you'd say, how about when you're graduating from college? See, you could do a couple things there. You're subliminally planning this idea that, yes, you're going to go to college, and yes, you're going to graduate. You don't have to say that. Let's think about when you're walking across that stage, graduating from college, and they're getting ready to hand you the diploma. Will that matter so much that your friend walked by you in the hall and didn't say hello? Or when you're sitting, now I'm going to turn it back to y'all, when you're on your deathbed, will you be like super duper upset that somebody backed into you at Albertsons? Is that what you're going to be thinking about, really? Oh, dang it, if that person wouldn't have backed into me. No. I think your family and your friends, your kids, that's what's going to be on your mind, right? Because some things are important and some things just aren't that important. It's hard to tell sometimes what's important and what's not important. But if we do the 100 years from now principle, that's going to give us some clarity. Like I say, the way you present it to your kids is going to be a little bit different than I'm talking to you. But if you put something way out in the future, will that matter? That helped me. Earlier this week, we got some renovations going on in our house. And, oh my gosh, one of the issues we had in our house was with water leaks, rain leaks, this, that. So I got some flooring, and I said, whatever kind of flooring I get, it's going to be impervious to water. Water will not bother any kind of flooring I put in my house. Whatever it is, if it's got something that can swell or warp or mess up, I don't want it. So we got a brand new flooring. It looks so beautiful. The next morning, you're not going to believe this. I seriously am getting ready to go to work, and I'm walking through the kitchen with my briefcase, and what's like all over the floor? There's a puddle of water in front of our dishwasher. We just had it repaired in December, by the way. A puddle of water. I'm thinking, oh no, my floor. And I'm like, oh, it's cool. Because I thought, you know, let's suppose there's a problem. 100 years from now, what's it going to matter? Am I really going to be worried about that? So the 100 years from now principle is pretty powerful. And even with kids, they have an idea that something way out in the future is not going to be the same as it is now. Now, it's not going to work with the little kids so much. As they get older, that will make a little bit more sense with them. But remember the 100 years from now principle. Next one, number 4. Remember the 10 minutes principle. Now, there's nothing magic in the number 10. We could say the 5 minutes or the 15 minutes or the 20 minutes. But here's the idea. Let me tell you what the idea is. How many times you say, I just can't, I don't have time right now. Can't read to you, can't talk to you, or whatever. We got to hurry, we got to do this or that. Rather than saying, I can't, how would it be if you say, hey, listen, I've only got 5 minutes, but let's sit down and do it now. Let's grab that book and read it. Or I've only got 10 minutes, but let's go for it. Hey, listen, I've got to be out of here in 10 minutes, but my time is yours for the next 10 minutes. That's powerful. Hey, guys, that works with your wife too, by the way. Just saying, 10 minutes is powerful. Doesn't sound like a lot. Now, I got a question for you. And I don't want you to raise your hand, but I want you to think about this. How many of you spend 10 minutes, uninterrupted time, with your kids, no TV, not driving a car, no phones around, no internet, no technology, Just you and that child. Don't raise your hands. Because I don't want to make any liars out of anybody here. It's tough. I mean, 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot. But if you take away the phones, take away the cars, and say, I am with that child for 10 minutes, what would that do to that child? If that child knew that every day, before they closed their eyes to go to sleep at night, they could count on the fact that their mom or dad was going to give them some uninterrupted time. What would that do to them? Say, no, we're just going to sit here. What are you doing? I just want to visit with you on screen. You might get some pushback from that at first, but I'm telling you what, you'll probably like it too. Now, some of your kids, I know them, that won't be a problem. In fact, you know, they enjoy talking quite a bit, so they'd like it to be 30 minutes, and you'd be all right with that. And that's cool. Some of your kids, they're not big talkers. They might be a little bit uncomfortable. And you might have to figure this thing out. But I'm telling you, if you spent 10 minutes uninterrupted with your kids, I'm not talking about traveling time. I'm talking about just sitting next to them. And guys, by the way, my hat's off to you if you're a single parent. But if you're married, it's imperative that you spend that 10 minutes with your husband or wife. It's imperative. If you're having struggles with your kids, I heard this many, many years ago. If you're having struggles with your kids, husband, wife, sit down together on the couch for 10 minutes. Every day, no TV, no agenda, sit down. Visit about what's going on, what's happened this week, what you got looking forward to. 10 minutes. And see what happens in your kids' lives. It's miraculous. It's incredible. There's a power in 10 minutes. So write that one down. All right. Next one is think through life issues out loud. So that's a normal part of learning for kids. If they hear people processing through things, it really helps them. So as a reading teacher, what you see happening a lot of times is teachers, especially in the younger grades, they will grab a book and they'll say, I wonder what this book is about. I didn't pick this book out for any reason, but let's see here. It's called Moonlight on Magic Flute. Wow, there's a boy playing a flute. He's dressed in funny clothes. They look like they're from a long time ago. There is a leopard and a bear. I wonder what this book is about. Now, as an adult, you don't talk like that, right? You take one look, but you've thought all those thoughts, right? You've thought through everything I said. Well, kids don't know that. They have to sort of learn that. What's the process when you pick up a book? No, you look at it. You sort of flip through the pages here. Oh, there's some pictures. Here's chapter headings. If there's a table of contents, that's great. You read a couple pages, you know what, you might decide you don't want to read that book. That's all right too. Or you might say, that one looks like a good one. I'm checking that one out. But it's the same thing when you're teaching your kids how to go through life. Sometimes you work through some tough situations that could be a learning opportunity. It won't be unless you walk through it with your kids. Yeah, somebody scratched my car today, but you know what? That's not a real big deal. That really bugs me, honestly, because I just got that car. Sort of, I didn't want anybody to scratch it. And if I thought about it a lot, that could really bug me. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, you know what, Johnny? You are the most important thing. What would that do to a kid if they heard you working through something like that? Now, disclaimer on this one here. This is very important here. Don't think out loud if you don't want that repeated at school and everywhere else. Okay? I'm just saying, because teachers hear a lot of stuff, right? They hear everything. So be nice to your teachers and love on them, treat them well. All right, so this is a great strategy for teaching your kids. Think through some of these stressful situations. You want your kids to learn how to go through anxiety? You work through it yourself. You're going to have anxious situations, anxious moments. If you talk out loud what you're thinking in that process, show them that yes, you're struggling, but you're working through that will help them. Set good boundaries. Okay, imagine getting on the road and there are people driving on the wrong side of the road, and some are going 5 miles an hour and some are going 80 miles an hour. Yeah, that's right, you're in Dallas, just kidding. That would produce some stress, wouldn't it? Because generally there are some boundaries, there are some rules that you follow. Think about it in a home when a parent says, yes, you can do this, and then they change their mind and say no, or they say, no, you cannot. But the child knows the rules of the game, and parents don't even know they're playing a game. And so the child says, okay, if I ask 4 times, on the 4th time they're going to scream really loud, but if I ask one more time a little bit later and I tell them I love them, then they'll give it to me. The kids know the rules. If you don't have boundaries, they will walk all over you. And they're not the enemy, but they just know the rules of the game. And sometimes we don't know we're even playing a game. So set good, healthy boundaries, because when there are no boundaries, it would be like playing basketball with no rules. I mean, the illustrations could go on, but I'm just telling you, no boundaries is going to create stress and anxiety for your kids. 7 and 8 have to do with giving permission. Give permission to your kids to struggle. It's not an abnormal thing to struggle. That is a normal part of any development. You have to struggle to survive. And if we give kids some sort of idea that there shouldn't be struggle in life, we're doing them a great disservice. So give them permission to struggle. And this next one, you're going to think, what? What are you saying? The next one is give permission not to be anxious. And these are not only for your kids, but this is for yourself as well. Because there really is, especially as a Christian, there is, like Paul says, there's a peace that transcends understanding. It goes beyond anything we can understand. Doesn't have to make sense. If you have peace, doesn't matter if other people think, you should be worried about this. Nope, sorry, I'm just not going to do it. You don't have to be worried. Let me just release you right now. You don't have to be worried, okay? I don't care what anybody else says. Now, there are some things we should be concerned about, but I don't have to be anxious. I'm free from that. And I can walk in that freedom. That's pretty cool, huh? That I don't have to be anxious. Now, sometimes it's just acknowledging that and then stepping into it. It's that easy sometimes. But I hate to say it, there are people who would like to put things on you that you don't have to take. And we need to teach our kids that as well. We've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about 8 things. I'm sure the list could go on. But we have just a minute. Does anybody have any comments or questions?